Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching the empty space around Earth's moon, when everything changed forever. The stars seemed to bend and twist as massive shapes emerged from nowhere. Ships larger than anything humanity had ever built appeared in perfect formation, their dark hulls reflecting no light. Jake had been expecting a routine patrol mission, but now he found himself staring at 12 enormous vessels that dwarfed Earth's most powerful warships. Each alien craft stretched for miles and hummed with energy that made his ship's sensors scream warnings. The bridge crew fell silent as they realized they were looking at something far beyond human technology. Admiral Lisa Grant received the first transmission at Earth Command 30 minutes later. The message came through every communication channel at once, translated into perfect English by technology that seemed to read human minds. The voice was calm and emotionless, like a computer. Reading a shopping list. "We are the hegemony. Your species has been selected for integration into our collective consciousness. You have 72 hours to prepare for absorption. Resistance will result in corrective measures." The transmission continued with details that made Lisa's blood run cold. The hegemony had done this before to 12 other species across the galaxy. Each time the process was the same: arrive, announce, absorb. Every civilization had eventually chosen to join their collective rather than face destruction. Captain Ryan Davis commanded Earth's defense fleet from his flagship, the Independence. He watched the alien ships position themselves around Earth's orbital stations and felt helpless. His 20 destroyers and 3 battleships looked like toys compared to the massive hegemony vessels. When he ordered a probe launched toward the nearest alien ship, it simply vanished as if it had never existed. The aliens demonstrated their power without warning. 3 of humanity's newest destroyers, the Atlanta, the Berlin, and the Tokyo, suddenly stopped moving. Their engines went dead, their weapons powered down, and their crews found themselves unable to control anything. The ships drifted helplessly, while the aliens scanned them with beams of purple light. President Alex Turner called an emergency session of the United Earth Assembly. Representatives from every nation gathered in the Great Hall while humanity faced its greatest crisis. The alien ultimatum was simple: surrender free will and join their collective or be destroyed, like the few species that had chosen extinction over absorption. Dr. Helen Brooks stood before the assembly with data that changed everything. As Earth's leading expert on alien biology, she had studied the transmissions and found something disturbing. The hegemony wasn't lying about the 12 species they had absorbed. Brain scans showed that every alien in their collective had the same neural patterns, the same thoughts, the same reactions. Individual consciousness had been completely erased. They call it integration, Helen told the assembled leaders. But it's actually murder on a planetary scale. Every person who joins their collective stops being themselves forever. Their bodies survive, but their minds become part of something else. The hegemony representative arrived on Earth 24 hours before the deadline. It looked human except for its completely black eyes and the way it moved without any personal mannerisms. The being that had once been an individual from some distant world now spoke only for the collective. "Resistance is illogical," the representative said during the final negotiation. "Every species eventually chooses survival over futile independence. Your individuality causes conflict, war, and suffering. We offer peace through unity." Jake Morrison watched the meeting from his ship's communications center. The representative explained that humans would keep their bodies and basic memories, but their ability to think independently would be removed. They would become part of something greater, working together without conflict or disagreement. "What about choice?" asked President Turner. "What about the right to make our own decisions?" The representative tilted its head as if the question made no sense. "Choice creates chaos. Individual will leads to war. The 12 species we have integrated now live in perfect harmony. They have no regrets because regret requires individual consciousness. Dr. Helen Brooks stepped forward at that moment and spoke words that would echo across the galaxy. We choose neither submission nor destruction. We choose a third option. We choose to remain human. The representative looked confused for the first time. This choice does not exist. You must select integration or elimination. There are no other options. Helen smiled grimly. Then you've never met humans before. We specialize in creating options that don't exist. The meeting ended, with humanity's official response delivered to the hegemony fleet. Earth would not surrender its independence. The species that had spent millions of years learning to think for themselves would not give up that gift for safety. Admiral Lisa Grant gave the order that put humanity on a collision course with the most powerful force in the galaxy. Earth's defenses went to maximum alert, while every human ship in the solar system prepared for battle they couldn't win. But somewhere in the back of Jake Morrison's mind, a small voice whispered that winning might not be the point. Sometimes, fighting for the right to remain yourself was more important than survival. Sometimes being human meant choosing the impossible option. President Alex Turner addressed the world as the hegemony deadline passed and their ships began moving toward Earth. The alien vessels descended through the atmosphere like falling stars, each one carrying technology designed to break human resistance. Turner's voice remained steady as he spoke to 8 billion people facing the end of their freedom. Today, we face an enemy that wants to take away everything that makes us human, Turner said from the White House bunker. They offer us safety in exchange for our souls. I say we keep our souls and make our own safety. The hegemony began their pacification protocol exactly as they had done 12 times before. Invisible fields of energy spread across Earth's surface, designed to suppress the neural pathways that allowed independent thought. The aliens expected humans to become docile within hours, ready for absorption into their collective consciousness. Instead, something unprecedented happened. Humans began rejecting the alien technology violently. People collapsed in the streets with nosebleeds and seizures, hospital emergency rooms filled with patients suffering from neural feedback that the alien fields couldn't control. The hegemony's perfect system was failing against human biology. Dr. Marcus Webb worked frantically in his laboratory beneath Colorado's Cheyenne Mountain. As humanity's leading neuroscientist, he had been studying brain patterns for 30 years, but had never seen anything like what was happening to his test subjects. The alien neural dampening fields weren't suppressing human consciousness. They were being actively rejected by it. It's like our brains are allergic to their control system, Webb reported to the military command. Every other species in the galaxy must have neural patterns that accept external control. Human brains seem designed to resist it. Webb's discovery explained why humans were the first species to fight back against the hegemony. Evolution had given humanity something unique, a chaotic, unpredictable neural structure that refused to be organized by outside forces. What the aliens saw as a flaw was actually humanity's greatest strength. Lieutenant Colonel Sandra Price led the first successful ground assault against a hegemony landing site in Nevada. Her Special Forces team approached the alien camp expecting to face technology beyond their understanding. Instead, they found confused aliens struggling to adapt to human tactics that made no logical sense. The hegemony soldiers moved in perfect coordination, sharing thoughts and reactions through their collective consciousness. They anticipated logical military strategies and countered them with mechanical precision. But Sandra's team didn't use logic. They used intuition, creativity, and pure stubbornness. Hit them from 3 directions at once, Sandra ordered. Then retreat to positions that make no tactical sense. When they try to predict our next move, we'll do something completely random. The strategy worked perfectly. Hegemony forces designed to counter rational opponents couldn't process human unpredictability. Their collective mind tried to analyze. Sandra's tactics and failed because there was no pattern to analyze. Humans fought like individuals, making split-second decisions that no computer could predict. General Kevin Stone coordinated global resistance from his command center in Washington. Reports flooded in from around the world as human forces engaged hegemony troops with increasing success. The aliens were discovering that conquering Earth would be nothing like their previous 12 victories. They've never fought a species that refuses to think logically, Stone told his staff. Every other civilization probably tried to match their superior technology with better tactics. We're beating them by being completely unreasonable. Intelligence reports revealed the disturbing truth about the hegemony's previous conquests. The 12 absorbed species hadn't just surrendered. They had been completely erased. Brain scans of captured hegemony soldiers showed identical neural patterns regardless of their original species. 12 distinct civilizations had been reduced to components in a single vast mind. Jake Morrison made a desperate decision aboard the UES Defiance. His ship couldn't match hegemony firepower, but it might be able to deliver something more valuable than weapons. Dr. Helen Brooks had prepared a message for the galaxy, a broadcast that would challenge everything the hegemony believed about. Conquest and control. We're going to penetrate their command ship, Morrison told his crew, not to destroy it, but to hijack their communication system. The entire galaxy needs to hear what we've learned about freedom. The Defiance began its suicidal run toward the massive hegemony flagship. Morrison's ship was designed for exploration, not warfare, but its crew had something the aliens lacked: the ability to improvise. They modified their engines, rerouted their shields, and prepared for a mission that had no logical chance of success. Meanwhile, Major Tony Carter fought street by street through the ruins of New York City. Hegemony ground forces had expected rapid victory, but found themselves trapped in urban warfare against an enemy that turned every building into a fortress. Human civilians joined the fighting with hunting rifles and improvised explosives. They don't understand guerrilla warfare, Carter reported during a brief ceasefire. Their collective consciousness is perfect for coordinated attacks, but useless for adapting to chaos. Every time we do something unexpected, their entire local network has to recalculate. Dr. Emma Johnson worked with captured hegemony technology in her Los Angeles laboratory. The alien devices were incredibly advanced, but built around the assumption that all consciousness followed predictable patterns. Human unpredictability created system errors that cascaded through their networks like computer viruses. Their greatest strength is also their greatest weakness, Johnson discovered. The collective consciousness gives them perfect coordination, but makes them vulnerable to chaotic input. If we can introduce enough random factors into their system, we might be able to crash their entire network. As battles raged across Earth, something extraordinary began happening in the deep space beyond the galaxy's rim. The hegemony's collective consciousness, designed to maintain perfect order across 12 species, started experiencing something it had never known: doubt. Individual thoughts began emerging within the collective for the first time in centuries. Buried memories of the absorbed species started surfacing as the network struggled to process humanity's refusal to conform. The Cetians remembered their songs, the Crystallites recalled their individual harmonies, and the warrior Draconis felt ancient anger stirring. The species that refused to be controlled was doing more than saving itself. It was awakening the sleeping minds of an entire galaxy. The UES Defiance somehow survived its impossible journey through the hegemony's defensive perimeter. Jake Morrison's ship had taken damage that should have destroyed it twice over, but human engineering combined with desperate innovation had kept them flying. Now, they hung in space next to the alien flagship, preparing to deliver humanity's message to the galaxy. Dr. Helen Brooks spoke into the recording device with words that would change everything. Her message was simple but revolutionary, a direct challenge to the collective consciousness that had ruled the galaxy for millennia. The broadcast would go out on every hegemony communication channel, reaching billions of absorbed minds across thousands of worlds. "You haven't conquered 12 species," Brooks said clearly. "You've murdered them. We are humanity, and we remember what you've forgotten, the right to choose our own destiny. Individual consciousness isn't a flaw to be corrected. It's the most precious thing in the universe." The transmission penetrated the hegemony's network like a virus spreading through a computer system. For the first time since their absorption, the minds of 12 extinct species began to stir. Ancient memories surfaced as the collective consciousness struggled to process concepts it had eliminated centuries ago. On the ocean world of Aquatis, something impossible happened. A hegemony soldier that had once been Cetian suddenly remembered the feeling of swimming freely through warm seas. The memory lasted only seconds before the collective suppressed it. But for those brief moments, an individual consciousness had existed within the unified mind. Jake Morrison watched his communication officer work frantically to maintain the broadcast signal. The hegemony was trying to cut their transmission, but human technology had one advantage. It was built by individuals who understood the value of backup systems. Every time the aliens blocked one channel, the humans opened two more. Back on Earth, Major Tony Carter led his urban fighters through the subway tunnels beneath Manhattan. The hegemony forces above ground were becoming increasingly disorganized, as their collective consciousness dealt with cascading system errors. Individual thoughts kept emerging in their network, creating confusion that human fighters exploited ruthlessly. "Something's happening to them," Carter reported to command. "Their coordination is breaking down. I've seen hegemony soldiers stop in the middle of battle like they're remembering something from a long time ago. The effect spread faster than the hegemony could contain it. On the crystal cities of Minerva Prime, silicon-based beings that had been absorbed into the collective began experiencing flashes of individual identity. They remembered the harmonic frequencies that had once been their personal songs, melodies that expressed individual thoughts and emotions. Admiral Lisa Grant coordinated with the emerging resistance movements across the galaxy using communication channels that the hegemony couldn't fully monitor. For the first time in the war, humanity wasn't fighting alone. Whispered voices from a dozen worlds began reaching out, asking the same question: how do we remember who we used to be? "The awakening is spreading," Grant reported to Earth's leadership. "But these species are weak from centuries of suppression. They need time to rebuild their individual identities, and the hegemony won't give them that time." Colonel Danny Rogers led a desperate mission to capture a hegemony communication hub on the dark side of Earth's moon. His team's objective wasn't military victory, but something more important: amplifying Dr. Brooks's message to reach even more distant corners of the galaxy. Every species that heard her words about choice and freedom began questioning their place in the collective. The hegemony leadership experienced something they had never known: fear. Their perfect order was unraveling as suppressed memories emerged throughout their network. Beings that had been components in their collective consciousness for centuries were suddenly trying to think as individuals again. Captain Ryan Davis discovered that human unpredictability wasn't just a psychological advantage in space combat. Hegemony battle computers designed to predict and counter logical military strategies couldn't process human tactics that violated every principle of rational warfare. Davis ordered his ships to attack in patterns that made no strategic sense, and watched alien formations fall apart trying to respond. "They're too logical," Davis explained to his fleet commanders. "Their computers can predict any reasonable tactic, so we'll use unreasonable ones. Fight like humans, not like machines." Meanwhile, Dr. Marcus Webb made another crucial discovery in his underground laboratory. The hegemony's collective consciousness wasn't just their strength, it was their critical weakness. The network that connected billions of minds could be overloaded by introducing too much chaotic information at once. "It's like a computer trying to process random numbers," Webb explained to the research team. Their collective mind can handle organized thoughts from absorbed species, but individual consciousness creates errors that multiply exponentially. We're not just fighting them, we're debugging their entire system. Engineer Kate Phillips worked frantically in the depths of a captured hegemony facility, trying to understand alien technology that seemed to operate on principles beyond human comprehension. But as she studied their systems, she realized they weren't more advanced. They were simply more organized. Human technology was chaotic and redundant, which made it harder to disable. Their stuff is elegant and efficient, Phillips reported, but that makes it fragile. Our equipment is messy and complicated, which means it keeps working even when it shouldn't. They built everything to support a collective consciousness, but individual minds break their systems. The awakening cascade reached its tipping point when a former Draconis warrior broke free from the collective during a battle above Earth's moon. For 30 seconds, the dragon-like being remembered its own name, its own family, its own world, before the collective forcibly reabsorbed it. But those 30 seconds were enough to inspire others. Across the galaxy, individual voices began emerging more frequently within the hegemony network. The herbarians remembered their peaceful gardens. The mechanoids recalled their individual programming, and the psychics felt their unique mental abilities stirring. Each recovered memory weakened the collective consciousness further. The hegemony realized they were facing something unprecedented. Not just military resistance, but psychological rebellion from within their own ranks. For the first time in their existence, they were losing control of the very minds they had spent centuries absorbing. Jake Morrison received an urgent message from Earth Command as his ship drifted near the hegemony flagship. The aliens were preparing to unleash their ultimate weapon, a consciousness bomb that would forcibly absorb every thinking being on Earth. Humanity had perhaps hours before their individuality was torn away forever. But the galaxy was awakening, and 12 extinct species were beginning to remember what they had lost when they chose safety over freedom. The rebellion spread across the galaxy faster than the hegemony could contain it. On distant worlds that had been silent for centuries, individual voices began breaking through the collective consciousness with increasing frequency. The Cetians sang fragments of ancient songs while the crystallites hummed half-remembered melodies that had once expressed their unique thoughts. Admiral Lisa Grant established communication with the emerging resistance movements using quantum channels that the hegemony couldn't monitor effectively. The messages were brief and often confused, as newly awakened minds struggled to remember how to think independently after centuries of collective absorption. "We remember water," came a transmission from the ocean world of Aquatis. "We remember swimming alone, thinking our own thoughts. Help us remember more." The awakened species were weak and disorganized, their individual identities barely reformed after generations of suppression. Many of the voices that emerged from the collective were immediately reabsorbed before they could fully establish independent consciousness. But each awakening inspired others to try breaking free. Colonel Danny Rogers successfully captured the hegemony communication hub on the lunar surface after a brutal assault that cost him half his team. The facility's technology was beyond human understanding, but Rogers didn't need to understand it. He just needed to use it. Dr. Brooks's message about freedom and choice began broadcasting to star systems that had never heard such concepts. "Every transmission we send out creates more chaos in their network," Rogers reported to Earth Command. "Their collective consciousness is like a perfect orchestra, but we're introducing musicians who refuse to play the same song." Meanwhile, Captain Ryan Davis led the Earth Defense Fleet in increasingly desperate battles around the planet's orbital stations. The hegemony had brought massive reinforcements from across the galaxy, but their ships were operating with reduced efficiency as their crews struggled with emerging individual thoughts. Davis discovered that hegemony battle tactics became completely ineffective when their pilots started experiencing personal memories. During one engagement, An alien battleship suddenly stopped firing and began broadcasting what sounded like a lullaby in some unknown language. The ship's pilot was remembering something from before the absorption. Their strength is becoming their weakness, Davis told his fleet commanders. The collective consciousness made them unbeatable when everyone thought the same way. Now that individuals are waking up inside their network, they can't coordinate effectively. On Earth's surface, Major Tony Carter fought through the ruins of cities that had become battlegrounds between human resistance and hegemony occupation forces. The aliens were no longer the perfectly coordinated army that had first landed. Individual soldiers sometimes stopped following orders as suppressed memories surfaced. Carter witnessed something extraordinary during the battle for Chicago. A hegemony soldier that had once been from the warrior species Draconis suddenly turned on its own squad, fighting with techniques that hadn't been seen in the galaxy for centuries. The being fought like an individual with personal honor rather than a component in a collective machine. Dr. Marcus Webb made a breakthrough in his research on the hegemony's collective consciousness. The alien network wasn't just vulnerable to individual thoughts. It was actively being damaged by them. Each awakening consciousness created processing errors that spread through the system like a virus. It's not just psychological, Webb explained to the research team. Their collective mind is literally breaking down under the strain of individual consciousness. They built their entire civilization around unified thought, and we're introducing the one thing their system can't handle: chaos. Engineer Kate Phillips worked deeper in the captured hegemony facility, uncovering technology that revealed the true scope of what humanity was fighting against. The collective consciousness wasn't just a tool for conquest, it was the foundation of everything the hegemony had built over millions of years. Phillips discovered records of the hegemony's original species, the first civilization to choose collective consciousness over individual thought. They had made the decision during a great crisis, trading their personal identities for the power to survive and expand across the galaxy. Now, humanity's resistance was forcing them to confront what they had given up. They weren't always a collective, Phillips reported in shock. They were individuals once, just like us. They chose to give up their humanity, or whatever their equivalent was, for safety and power. We're not just fighting them, we're fighting what they used to be. The awakening cascade reached new star systems as Dr. Brooks's message spread through captured communication networks. Species that had been components in the hegemony collective for millennia began experiencing flashes of individual memory. The mechanoids remembered the satisfaction of building unique creations, while the psychics recalled the joy of private thoughts. But the hegemony leadership was not helpless. As their collective consciousness destabilized, they began implementing desperate measures to maintain control. Entire sectors of awakening minds were being forcibly suppressed or eliminated to prevent further contamination of the network. Jake Morrison received horrifying intelligence from his position near the hegemony flagship. The aliens were preparing to execute what they called consciousness purification, the complete elimination of any individual thoughts within their collective. Billions of awakening minds would be erased to save the unity of the whole. They're going to kill everyone who's starting to remember, Morrison transmitted to Earth. Every Cedian learning to sing again, every crystallite finding their harmony, they'll all be destroyed to preserve the collective. Admiral Lisa Grant faced an impossible choice. Earth's forces could continue fighting for their own freedom, or they could risk everything in a desperate attempt to save the awakening minds across the galaxy. The decision would determine not just humanity's fate, but the future of individual consciousness itself. President Alex Turner addressed the human resistance from his bunker as hegemony forces closed in on Earth's major cities. The planet's defenses were failing, but something more important than military victory was at stake. The very concept of individual thought was fighting for survival against a force that had dominated the galaxy for millions of years. "We started this war to stay human," Turner announced. "Now we discover we're fighting for everyone who ever dreamed of being free. We may not be able to save ourselves, but we can save the idea that every mind deserves to think its own thoughts. Dr. Emma Johnson made a final discovery that changed everything. Hidden in the deepest levels of hegemony technology, she found the original consciousness patterns of the 12 absorbed species. They weren't just suppressed, they were stored, complete and intact, waiting for someone to know how to restore them. They're all still there, Johnson broadcast to the human fleet. Every individual mind that was ever absorbed into the collective. If we can reach the Master Archive, we might be able to give them back their freedom. The Galactic War reached its final phase as species across the galaxy faced a choice that would determine the future of consciousness itself. The hegemony, desperate to maintain their collective unity, began executing mass purges of any individual thoughts that emerged within their network. Entire star systems went silent as awakening minds were forcibly erased. Commander Jake Morrison led a coalition fleet of human ships and vessels piloted by newly independent aliens toward the hegemony's central world. The planet called Unity housed the Master Archive, the repository containing the original consciousness patterns of all 12 absorbed species. If they could reach it, billions of individual minds might be restored to freedom. But the mission required crossing half the galaxy while fighting through hegemony forces that were growing more desperate and dangerous with each passing hour. The collective consciousness was sacrificing strategic advantage to preserve its unity, throwing away military assets to prevent further awakening. Dr. Marcus Webb had developed a technique to separate individual neural patterns from the collective network, but it required enormous risk. Each extraction might save a species' identity, but the process could kill millions of consciousness still trapped within the system. The cure might be worse than the disease. We're essentially performing surgery on a living galaxy-spanning mind, Webb explained to the mission leaders. If we make a mistake, we could lobotomize entire civilizations instead of freeing them. Back on Earth, President Alex Turner watched humanity's home planet burn under hegemony bombardment. The aliens had abandoned their original plan of absorption and were now focused on complete extermination. Human resistance had marked the species for total destruction rather than integration into the collective. Major Tony Carter led the last defenders of Washington through the rubble of the capital city. His forces were outnumbered 1,000 to 1, but they fought with the desperate fury of beings who would rather die free than live as slaves. Every building became a fortress, every street a battlefield. "They're not trying to capture us anymore," Carter reported during a brief ceasefire. "They want to erase us completely. We've become too dangerous to their collective consciousness to be allowed to exist." Lieutenant Sarah Kim received the mission that would determine everything. Flying the experimental fighter Wildcard, she would attempt to penetrate the Master Archive's defenses and deliver Dr. Webb's consciousness separation device to the facility's core. The mission was essentially suicide, but success might free 12 species from centuries of slavery. Sarah's ship was humanity's most advanced fighter, built with technology reverse-engineered from captured hegemony equipment. But it was also infused with human unpredictability, systems that worked according to intuition rather than logic, weapons that fired in patterns no computer could predict. Admiral Lisa Grant coordinated the final assault from her flagship, the Liberty. Human and alien ships fought side by side against hegemony forces that had ruled the galaxy for millennia. The battle was hopeless from a military standpoint, but victory wasn't measured in ships destroyed or territory gained. "We're not fighting to win this war," Grant told her fleet commanders. "We're fighting to prove that freedom is worth dying for. Every shot we fire is a declaration that individual consciousness deserves to exist." The awakened aliens fought with techniques their species hadn't used for centuries. Cydian ships moved through space like living creatures, following instincts that had been suppressed for generations. Crystallite vessels sang harmonies that disrupted hegemony electronics, each ship expressing its pilot's unique personality through sound. Captain Ryan Davis led the diversionary attack on Unity's orbital, defenses while Sarah Kim's fighter approached the master archive. The hegemony threw everything they had at the human fleet, willing to sacrifice their own forces to prevent the archive from being compromised. "They know what we're really after," Davis transmitted as his ship took devastating damage. "They're not protecting a military target. They're protecting the prison where they keep the souls of 12 civilizations." Dr. Emma Johnson worked frantically aboard the Liberty, monitoring the consciousness separation device that Sarah Kim carried toward the archive. The technology was untested and dangerous, but it represented the only hope of freeing the minds trapped within the hegemony collective. "The device will either liberate them or kill them," Johnson reported. "We won't know which until Sarah activates it. This is the biggest gamble in galactic history." Colonel Danny Rogers led ground forces in a desperate assault on Unity's surface defenses. His mission was to create enough chaos to mask Sarah's approach to the Master Archive. Human soldiers fought alongside awakened aliens who remembered what it meant to fight for personal honor rather than collective objectives. The hegemony. Defenders fought with mechanical precision but lacked the creativity and adaptability that came with individual consciousness. They couldn't understand why the attackers would sacrifice themselves for abstract concepts like freedom and personal identity. Sarah Kim's fighter screamed through Unity's atmosphere, dodging defensive fire that would have destroyed any conventional aircraft. The Wildcard's chaotic flight patterns confused hegemony tracking systems designed to predict logical attack vectors. Sarah flew like a human, unpredictably, irrationally, and effectively. Engineer Kate Phillips had discovered the Master Archive's greatest secret during her research. The facility didn't just store consciousness patterns, it was actively preventing them from fading away. The hegemony had preserved every individual mind they had absorbed, keeping them alive but imprisoned for millions of years. They could have let those minds die naturally, Phillips explained in her final report. Instead, they kept them conscious and aware but unable to express themselves. Every absorbed being has been awake and screaming silently for centuries. As Sarah's ship approached the Master Archive, the building's defenses activated with desperate intensity. The hegemony knew that losing the archive would mean losing control of 12 species worth of consciousness. Everything they had built would collapse if individual minds were restored across the galaxy. Sarah felt her fighter taking damage that should have destroyed it, but human engineering combined with alien technology created something resilient beyond logic. The ship held together through determination and spare parts, carrying its precious cargo toward the most important target in galactic history. The moment of truth arrived as Sarah's fighter crashed through the Master Archive's outer shell. The consciousness separation device armed itself automatically, preparing to either liberate billions of minds or destroy them in the attempt. Sarah had seconds to decide the fate of 12 civilizations. "For everyone who ever dreamed of being free," Sarah whispered as she activated the device, and her ship disappeared in a blaze of light that could be seen across the galaxy. The light from Sarah Kim's sacrifice spread across the galaxy like a wave of liberation. The consciousness separation device activated perfectly, sending pulses of neural disruption through every connection in the hegemony's collective network. For the first time in millions of years, 12 distinct species suddenly remembered who they were. The effect was immediate and devastating to the collective consciousness. Billions of individual minds that had been suppressed for centuries suddenly asserted their independence. The Cedians sang their ancient songs of the deep ocean. The Crystallites hummed harmonies that expressed personal joy and sorrow, and the warrior Draconis roared with individual pride. The hegemony's military forces collapsed as their unified consciousness shattered into countless separate minds. Ships that had moved in perfect coordination suddenly stopped responding to central command. Soldiers who had fought as components of a vast machine began acting like individuals with personal thoughts and fears. Admiral Lisa Grant watched from the bridge of the Liberty as hegemony battleships simply powered down their weapons and drifted silently in space. The collective consciousness that had held the galaxy in its grip for millennia was dissolving as billions of beings chose individual freedom over unified slavery. "They're surrendering," Grant reported in amazement. "Not to us, to themselves. They're choosing to be individuals again instead of parts of the collective." Commander Jake Morrison received transmissions from across the galaxy as newly freed species tried to remember how to communicate as individuals. The messages were chaotic and emotional, filled with joy, confusion, and wonder, as beings experienced personal thoughts for the first time in generations. "We are free," came a transmission from the crystal cities of Minerva Prime. "We remember our names, our families, our dreams. We remember what it means to be ourselves." But the victory came at a terrible cost. Entire star systems lay in ruins from the war, and billions of beings had died in the fighting. The process of consciousness separation had been traumatic for many, leaving some minds damaged or incomplete. Freedom was not without its price. Dr. Marcus Webb worked with teams across the galaxy to help the newly awakened species rebuild their individual identities. Many beings had been part of the collective for so long that they had to relearn basic concepts like personal preference, individual choice, and private thought. "It's like teaching children how to walk," Webb reported from the Rehabilitation Center on Unity. "These civilizations have to rediscover everything that makes them unique as individuals and as species." The former hegemony worlds began the long process of rebuilding their distinct cultures. Some species chose to maintain limited collective consciousness but made it voluntary rather than mandatory. Others embraced radical individualism, exploring possibilities they had never known existed during their absorption. President Alex Turner addressed the First Galactic Independence Council in over a millennium. Representatives from 14 free species gathered to establish new principles for interstellar relations based on respect for individual consciousness and species autonomy. "We didn't fight for human supremacy," Turner explained to the assembled delegates. "We fought for the right of every mind to choose its own path. That principle must guide everything we build together." Admiral Lisa Grant became the first commander of the Combined Free Fleet, a military force dedicated to protecting the independence of all species. Ships from different worlds patrolled together, their crews learning to work as individuals while respecting each other's unique perspectives and abilities. The new fleet included vessels that reflected each species' rediscovered identity. Setian bioships that grew rather than being built, crystallite vessels that sang as they moved through space, and human craft that operated on principles of controlled chaos and adaptive innovation. Dr. Helen Brooks, now recognized as the philosopher of galactic freedom, established the Institute for Individual Consciousness on the former hegemony capital world. The facility studied the nature of personal identity and developed techniques to help beings maintain their individuality while cooperating with others. "Freedom isn't just the absence of control," Brooks taught her students. "It's the active choice to think your own thoughts, make your own decisions, and take responsibility for your own actions. That choice must be renewed every day by every individual." Engineer Kate Phillips led the effort to rebuild galactic civilization using technology that supported individual consciousness rather than suppressing it. The new systems were chaotic and inefficient compared to hegemony designs, but they were also flexible and creative in ways the collective had never achieved. Some of the awakened species struggled with their newfound freedom. The psychics found their enhanced mental abilities overwhelming without the collective to regulate them. The mechanoids had difficulty making decisions without central programming. Freedom required constant effort and sometimes painful choices. Captain Ryan Davis commanded exploration missions to the far reaches of the galaxy, searching for other species that might have avoided hegemony absorption. The message of liberation spread through space, carried by ships from all 14 free civilizations. "There are more galaxies out there," Davis reported after each mission. More species that might need to learn what we've learned about freedom. Our work isn't finished. The species that had refused to be controlled found themselves becoming the guardians of galactic liberty. Human ships joined fleets from across the galaxy in spreading the message that individual consciousness was worth fighting for. Major Tony Carter, now General Carter, established training programs to help the newly free species defend themselves against any future threats to their independence. The courses taught not just military tactics, but the philosophical foundations of freedom. Freedom isn't something you win once and keep forever, Carter explained to his mixed species classes. It's something you have to choose and defend every day. The moment you stop valuing your individual thoughts, someone will try to take them away. Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Pioneer, humanity's newest exploration vessel, as it prepared to leave the galaxy entirely. The ship carried volunteers from all 14 species on a mission to spread the message of freedom to distant galaxies where other collectives might rule. We've learned that consciousness is the most precious thing in the universe, Morrison told his diverse crew. Individual thoughts, personal dreams, private hopes, these things are worth any sacrifice to protect. The galaxy had been transformed by the species that refused to surrender their humanity. Where once a single collective consciousness had ruled in perfect order, now billions of individual minds thought their own thoughts and chose their own destinies. The final transmission from Earth carried a simple message to any species listening. Among the stars, you are not alone. The galaxy remembers what freedom means, and we will never let it be forgotten again. Individual consciousness is the birthright of every thinking being, and it will be defended by all who value the right to be themselves. In the vast cosmos beyond, that message continued to spread, carried by ships crewed with individuals who had learned that being free was worth any price.